He heard the gasp before he felt the slap. His cheek burned as he stared at her, stunned that she, the woman he once called gentle, had struck him in front of the marriage counselor. The counselor froze. She didn't apologize. She only said she wanted the marriage to end that day. Richard touched his face like he couldn't believe she dared to hit him. He sat back in his chair and let out a loud laugh. It echoed across the quiet room. The laugh wasn't joy. It was triumph. "So this is how the great Melissa breaks," he said. She didn't respond. She grabbed her bag and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind her. Her heart raced. Her mind held on to one truth. If she stayed in that marriage, she would lose everything. She walked straight to her car and drove to her lawyer's office. She had already prepared most of the documents. She had already accepted the marriage was dead long before she slapped him. Richard came home late that night. He walked through the front door with 2 buttons undone and the smell of perfume that wasn't hers. He didn't even hide it. He dropped his keys, opened the fridge, and picked up a beer. "So you filed for divorce," he said. She didn't turn. She kept washing the dishes. "Yes." Another laugh. He loved that laugh. It was the one thing she hated more than the lies. "You think you're going to walk away from me and live some happy life? Cute." She dried her hands and faced him. "I'm walking away because the life with you is already dead." He raised the bottle in a toast. "To freedom, then. You're about to lose the only good thing that ever happened to you." She didn't say a word. She had learned silence shook him more than anger. The days that followed moved in a straight line toward the courtroom. Richard kept bragging. He told friends she would be left with nothing. He joked about how he'd take the house and the car. He laughed at the idea that she had hired the most expensive divorce lawyer in town. He didn't know why she picked that lawyer. He assumed it was desperation. He didn't know the real reason. She could afford him. Richard had always believed she earned a modest salary as a project assistant. He never asked questions about how she paid for certain things. He never noticed that the modest salary deposited in their joint account was only a small part of her actual income. He never cared to look at the quiet computers in her office that ran models all night. He only cared that she cooked, cleaned, and lived under the roof he claimed was his. The morning of the divorce hearing arrived with a cold wind. She wore a simple black dress. He wore a bright suit, bold as his confidence. He winked at her when they entered the courtroom. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'll be gentle when the judge gives me everything." She sat down without replying. The judge began with the formalities. Richard leaned back with a smirk, tapping his pen on the table. Her lawyer placed a thick file on the desk. Richard's lawyer didn't seem concerned. He hadn't been given the full picture by his client. Richard had only said, "She's broke. Let's wrap this fast." The judge asked if both parties agreed to proceed. She nodded. Richard said, "Absolutely." Her lawyer stood. "Your Honor, before we move forward, my client requests that the financial documents submitted last week be read into the record." Richard rolled his eyes. "Here we go with her fantasy savings," he whispered loudly. The judge opened the file. The sound of pages turning filled the room. "Mrs. Akang-Smith net worth stands at $15 million. Silence. The judge looked up. Richard froze. His pen slipped from his hand and rolled under the table. The judge continued reading numbers. Investments. Property. Company shares. Royalties. Algorithms licensed to 2 foreign firms. A trust under her name. Richard blinked at her like he didn't recognize the woman he had lived with for 9 years. His voice cracked. "Wait, what?" "She doesn't have that kind of money." Her lawyer spoke without raising his tone. "She does. And she brought proof." Richard looked at her. For the first time, she saw fear instead of arrogance. "That's not real," he said. "You were a project assistant." She didn't speak. She let the truth sit between them. The judge kept reading. Richard's face changed shade by shade. His earlier laughter looked ridiculous now. As the judge closed the file, he cleared his throat. "This changes the nature of the divorce settlement. Mrs. Akang-Smith is the higher-earning spouse. She will retain the properties acquired with her funds. The court will not award spousal support to Mr. Smith." Richard shot up from his chair. Spousal support? Why would I need spousal support? The judge blinked slowly. Because without her income, you fall below the threshold for financial independence during the transition period. The law allows for it. Richard's mouth hung open. The courtroom stared. He sat down slowly, the shock pulling him inward. He whispered, "Melissa, what is all this?" She looked straight ahead. "You never asked who I was. You only cared about who you wanted me to be." His breath shook. His hands trembled. The judge asked her lawyer to continue. The lawyer described how she built her passive income. He explained her patents. He showed records of her quiet consulting company. Richard's world shrank with every document presented. She remembered the nights she tried to tell him about her work. He would wave her off and say, "Let me handle the money stuff." Except he never handled anything. He spent. He bragged. He demanded more. The judge signed the order. Richard stared at the papers in front of him. His earlier victory laugh echoed in her memory. He had mocked her. Now the final blow had landed on him. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so much he had to steady it with the other. He signed the divorce papers in silence. When he finished, he pushed the pen away and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She stood and gathered her things. "You weren't listening." He reached out as if he wanted to hold her arm, but he didn't touch her. His voice softened. "Were we ever partners?" She didn't answer. She walked out of the courtroom, feeling the weight slide off her shoulders. Behind her, Richard sat alone, realizing the world he built in his mind never existed. Outside, the wind felt different. She stood on the courthouse steps and breathed in. For the first time in years, she felt free. She had walked into the courtroom carrying fear. She walked out carrying none. She drove away from the courthouse and didn't look back. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel as she turned onto the main road. The air felt heavier. She didn't want to cry, but her eyes stung. Not from sadness. From release. She reached her apartment, locked the door, and sat on the couch without removing her shoes. The silence felt safe. For years, Richard filled every room with noise. She had forgotten how quiet freedom sounded. Her phone buzzed. She didn't check it. She knew who it was. A second buzz. A third. She turned the phone face down and closed her eyes. Her heart beat slow and steady. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. His anger once felt larger than life. Now he felt small. Later that evening, she checked the messages. 3 missed calls. 1 voice note. 2 texts. The first text read, "We need to talk." The second read, "I deserve an explanation." She put the phone down again. She made tea. She sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. Her chest loosened as she breathed in the warm steam. Every sip reminded her she was still standing after years of being crushed. Her phone rang again. She answered this time. Richard's voice came through fast and shaky. "Melissa, you blindsided me today." She said nothing. "You hid millions. You hid a whole life from me." She kept her tone steady. "I didn't hide anything. You didn't care enough to ask." He let out a loud breath. "I lived with you. I slept next to you for years. How could I not know? You didn't look. You only looked at yourself." He didn't reply for a moment. "I need you to tell me why you let me think I was the provider." "You needed to think that," she said. "That's not fair. You weren't ready for the truth." He scoffed. "Oh, please. If I had known you were rich, do you know how different things would have been? You should have told me." "That's why I didn't," she said. He paused again, trying to swallow his frustration. "You made me sign with the whole courtroom thinking I was after your money." "You were after control," she said. "There's a difference." She heard him pacing. "Are you proud of yourself?" "You humiliated me." "You humiliated yourself," she answered. "I only revealed who I was." He didn't know how to respond. She heard him breathe hard into the phone. "Let me come over. We can talk." "No." He raised his voice. "You can't shut me out." "I already did." Silence. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I didn't know I could lose you like this." "You lost me long before the papers," she replied. She hung up before he could speak again. She didn't block him. She didn't need to. His voice no longer had power. Hours passed. She read a book. She cooked for herself. She played music she hadn't played in years. The night felt calm. Then a knock hit her door. Hard. Persistent. She froze. She stepped closer and looked through the peephole. Richard stood there, breathing fast, hand raised for another knock. She kept the door locked. "What do you want?" she said through the wood. "We can't end like this," he said. "Open the door." "No. Please. Just talk to me." "We already talked. I'm not leaving until you open this door." She exhaled and leaned her forehead against the door. "You need to go home, Richard." "I need answers," he said. "You need acceptance," she replied. He fell silent again. "Were you planning to leave me even if I changed?" he asked. She paused. "Yes." He let out a low breath that sounded like defeat. "When did you stop loving me?" he asked. She bit her lip. She wanted to tell the truth. She owed herself that. "When you stopped seeing me," she said. He nodded slowly on the other side of the door. She heard his footsteps shift. Another breath. "Do you remember when we first met?" he asked. "Yes. I thought you were the best thing that had ever happened to me." "You said that once." "I meant it," he said. She stayed quiet. "I'm sorry," he added. She felt a sting in her chest. Not because she wanted him back. Because the apology came 10 years late. "Good night, Richard," she said. He didn't move. Then he whispered, "I'll never understand how you lived a double life." "I lived one life," she answered. "You just weren't in it." This time, he stepped away. Slow, heavy steps down the hallway. The elevator dinged. Then silence returned. She walked back to the couch and sat down. Her hands shook a little. Not from fear. From the weight of finality. She slept well that night. The next morning, she opened her curtains and let the sunlight in. Her lawyer texted to confirm the final filings. Her accountant sent updates about her investments. Her team messaged about the new contract for her algorithm licensing. Her life moved forward at a pace she hadn't felt in years. But Richard didn't disappear. He sent another message. "I want to understand the person I married. Meet me. One last time." He woke to the sound of his phone exploding with messages. His thumb fumbled. He read the first line and felt his stomach drop. "Your patent is being challenged," it said. He threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and bounced. He stared at the ceiling. The ceiling stared back like an accusation. He had built his life on certainty. That certainty cracked. He paced the length of the apartment and stopped only when the memory of the judge's words returned. 15.2 million. Passive income. Royalties. Trust. He had laughed in the courtroom. Now he could not get the numbers out of his head. He called his lawyer. The call went straight to voicemail. He left a message that sounded thin and brittle. "Figure it out," he told the empty line. "Tell me what to do." He did not know what to do. News alerts began to pop up. Friends texted with questions that smelled like curiosity and hunger. He felt the weight of every whispered opinion. He had been the joke at parties. Now he was the punchline in his own life. Melissa watched him from a distance. She read the same alerts. She watched the man who once shouted for attention now shrink into odd interviews and public pity. She felt a twist in her chest that was not triumph. It was an old, small grief. It fluttered then flew away. Her phone rang. It was an anchor asking for a sit down. She declined. She did not want microphones in the middle of this end. Her team suggested statements, carefully crafted messages, polite refusals. She let them handle it. She preferred quiet. Her work spoke for her. The week after the divorce, the papers printed stories about the court day. Headlines split the truth into bites. They sounded hungry. They wanted scandal. She ignored them. Richard lost control in ways he did not expect. He started spending with a new kind of desperation. He bought flashy things the way a man tries to drown a bad song with loud music. He booked a trip. He took photos in exotic places and posted them like evidence that his life continued. He called her once from an airport lounge. Laughter in the background. The call cut off. She did not answer. Then the lawsuits began. One by one. Small claims about minor debts. A local vendor who said he had been cheated. A former employee who claimed wrongful termination. A smear on a forum. A video that took an old argument and rewired it into something ugly. The effort felt coordinated. It looked like revenge stitched by hands that were not his. She learned about a shell company he had set up years ago. It had little assets, but lots of attitude. He had used it to open accounts, hide expenses, and pretend at philanthropy. That company now became a battlefield. He wanted to paint himself as victim. He wanted the world to believe he lost everything. Melissa met with her board. They wanted calm. They wanted distance. She gave them action. She signed documents that moved assets into secure trusts. She hired counsel who smelled like cold strategy. She moved parts of her business to a new name. She made phone calls with numbers she had never used in public. He showed up at a charity event she donated to. He stood at the back and watched her speak. He clapped at the wrong moments. He looked like a man trying to find the script. She saw the shadow on his face that used to be swagger. The crowd didn't notice his loneliness. They only noticed her poise. After the event, he approached. He put on a smile that fell short. "You came back to remind me I was wrong," she said. He hesitated. "I came to ask you to stop," he said. "Stop what?" "All of this. The papers, the announcements, the money, the threats." She shook her head. "You started the threats," she said. "I did not. People are using me. People always use you." He glared. "Don't you get tired of being strong all the time?" he asked. "I get tired of being small," she said. He drew his breath in like he wanted to say something large. Instead he said, "I need help." She did not hand him a lifeline. She handed him a question that would not be answered easily. "What do you want me to do?" He looked like he might cry. "Tell them I was the one who messed up. Tell them to stop." She considered the tiny theater of his plea. She saw the boy beneath the bravado. She remembered early mornings when he read aloud from books. She remembered promises he made in front of her mother. Those promises had the weight of future plans. He had wasted them. "No," she said. "I will not lie." He stepped back as if punched. "You owe me," he said. "I deserve an apology." "You already got one from yourself," she replied. "I don't need that currency." He left. The night closed around him like a coat too thin for the cold. The smear grew. Anonymous posts spread false claims about her business. One article alleged she used company funds to pay off lovers. Another claimed she staged the court to humiliate him. The claims followed like winter behind rain. Each rumor was a shovel of dirt thrown at a buried truth. Her team escalated. They compiled evidence. They opened defamation cases. They alerted platforms. She signed subpoenas. She sat through depositions where grown men tried to name the woman who had hurt them. She answered questions about bank statements, investments, and offshore accounts like a fact reader reciting dates. In one deposition, a lawyer leaned across the table and said, "Why keep everything hidden from your husband?" She looked at him and named a list of small betrayals. He did not expect that. He had prepared questions that smelled of greed. He had not prepared for the truth. "Because he would have broken me," she said. The lawyer frowned. He did not get the human part of that answer. He only wanted numbers. Numbers arrived like cold punctuation. Court filings. Takedown notices. Countersuits. The legal theater spun on and on. The world watched, traded opinions, and clicked. Richard found new audiences. He went on podcasts and told a story of betrayal and surprise. He sold the narrative of a man wronged. Some listened. Most moved on. Melissa focused on the next product. She pushed a version to clients in Asia. She traveled to negotiate terms. She closed deals in dim conference rooms and airport lounges. Every handshake was a stitch that repaired holes she had not shown anyone. One night in a hotel, she opened her laptop and read an email from a young developer thanking her for a grant that had allowed him to continue work. The email arrived like a small light. She smiled, then felt something else. A tightness of loneliness. She missed partnership the way one misses a hand in the dark. She missed a companion who asked small questions about a tired day. She did not miss the man she had divorced. She missed the idea of a friend to grow with. She sat at the window and watched city lights cut the sky into fragments. The sound of cars built a slow, low rhythm. She realized she could build a life that included soft things. She could mentor, fund, and teach. She could be generous without losing herself. Richard called at midnight. He sounded younger. He asked for one meeting. He wanted to talk. He wanted to apologize. She thought about the phone in her hand. She thought about the long line of nights he had left her awake. She thought about his laugh in the courtroom. She thought of the nights he promised he would change. She set the phone down. He left one last message. "Forgive me," he said. She listened and then deleted the message. She stood and walked to the mirror. She looked at her face as if it belonged to a stranger who had done brave things. She allowed a small, honest smile. Outside, a car horn sounded. Inside, the clock ticked forward. She would keep moving. She would keep building. She would not look back until the past stopped trying to follow. He found the envelope on his kitchen table before dawn. The paper was thick and unmarked except for his name in a hurried scrawl. He opened it with hands that barely obeyed him. Inside were photos, close-ups of signatures, receipts, a ledger with numbers that meant ruin if true. He slammed the envelope shut and dropped it into the sink. The sound echoed like a verdict. Melissa woke to a flurry of emails. Her assistant called twice. Her inbox showed urgent flags. She read the first message and felt the air thin. Threat of injunction. Anonymous filings. Someone is trying to freeze assets linked to your name. She stood, walked to the window, and watched morning peel the city awake. She had prepared for lawsuits. She had not prepared for this methodical hunger. She met with counsel at 9. They spoke fast. They mapped legal moves while she listened. She signed authorizations and handed over passwords. She asked one quiet question. Who stands to gain from this? No one single person, her lead counsel said. This looks like a smear cell. Coordinated. They want panic. She thought of Richard and the shell company. She thought of the men who loved a good scandal. She thought of nights when she had woken to the sound of someone else's keys in his pocket. He booked a cheap hotel under a false name. He followed her to a luncheon and watched from a shadowed table. He posted a thin apology on social media and left the comments open. He hired an online reputation fixer who promised quick removal for a price. Melissa moved through the day with a clipped rhythm. She read statements. She signed motions. She gave an interview to a trade journal that asked what she would do next. She said, "I'll keep building." It sounded simple and it held everything she needed it to hold. That night he knocked on her office door. Security buzzed him in by mistake. He stood in the lobby like a man expecting to apologize and found only a reception that looked right through him. She met him in a hallway lined with framed patents. He looked smaller next to the plaques that bore her name. "I'm sorry about the filings," he said. "They're not yours," she replied. "Why are you here?" "I want to help," he said. "I can fix things." "You broke them," she said. He searched her face as if for proof he still mattered. "Tell me what to do," he insisted. She listened to the sincerity in his voice. She remembered a younger version who loved books and small kindnesses. She had grief for that man. She also had limits. "I don't need your help," she said. "I need resolution." He lowered his eyes. "How do I make that happen?" he asked. "Stop following my trail," she said. "Stop amplifying the noise." He swallowed. "I don't know how," he said. "Then step back," she answered. He left then, but not before he turned and said, "I'll find who did this." She wanted to believe him, and she did not. Belief no longer came easy. 2 days later, a new claim arrived. A former collaborator accused her company of stealing code. The claim came with a redacted archive and a name that used to be close. The accusation hit like an old bruise. She called the collaborator. He sounded desperate and small. He said, "They told me you'd compensate me." I didn't think they lied. She heard the man's betrayal and the tug of pity. "We'll review the code," she said. "If there's a mistake, we'll fix it." He sobbed on the line. She put the call down and cried once, a quick, honest sound. Then she wiped her face and typed into a document she had learned to love, a plan. Her plan cut into the problem with surgical focus. Confirm ownership. Trace commits. Request timestamps. Prepare counterclaims. Notify platforms. Call in forensic analysts. The work became a scaffold for her sanity. Each completed step eased the pounding in her chest. Her team moved like a small machine and they never stopped. Meanwhile, he wandered through public spaces with a paper mask of shame. He talked to supporters who wanted to believe. He participated in angry live streams that stitched together lies and truth until both bled together. He got threats too. A man at a bar accused him of taking advantage of his ex. Another sent him screenshots of bank accounts he did not recognize. He felt hunted. He chose revenge in a brittle, clumsy way. He leaked a private message that included a misquoted sentence and a photograph cropped to exclude context. The post went viral. A radio show replayed the clip. The clip stripped nuance until it looked like proof. Melissa called him once after the clip. She kept her voice steady. "Why did you do that?" He admitted, "I wanted people to see what I saw. I wanted them to hate me less by hating you more." "You wanted validation," she said. "Yes. You chose a way that burns everyone." He was quiet. "Tell me what to do," he said again. She hung up. The legal battle moved into weeks and then months. Depositions became ritual. Reporters learned names and repeated them like mantras. The smear cell sent more files. Her counsel pushed back with precision. Forensic reports arrived and undermined anonymous claims. A platform removed several posts. One defendant dropped out after receiving a cease and desist. Richard watched as the tide shifted bit by bit. He watched others step in to take credit. He watched the story morph into something his small anger could not hold. One night, he showed up at a community tech meetup where she was a guest. He slipped into a back seat and listened as she spoke about code ethics and mentorship. She spoke with no bitterness. She spoke with care. Afterward, an attendee approached and said, "You changed my life." He looked at the woman they called by name and felt a bitter, sudden clarity. He tapped her shoulder. "You were brilliant," he said. She turned, tired but ready. "You can stop," she told him. "You can build something better with your knowledge." He let out a laugh that was more a choke. "Do you mean that?" he asked. "Yes," she answered. He stared at her. His breath slowed. He had a choice. He had no map for this new thing. Back at his apartment, he wrote a string of angry, tender emails and then deleted them. He emailed the fixer and told him to pull everything down. He called 2 journalists and asked for corrections. He admitted details in a private message and asked for forgiveness he did not expect to receive. Weeks passed. Some posts disappeared. Some friends returned. Not all doors reopened, but some did. Melissa continued to forge ahead. She closed deals. She taught interns. She mentored a young woman who had the same quiet drive she once had. One afternoon, the young woman asked, "Do you ever want to forgive him?" Melissa paused. "I forgave the idea of him," she said. Forgiveness is not a single act. It is a series of small endings. The intern nodded as if she understood the weight that sentence carried. On a rain-slick evening, Melissa received an unexpected package. A small book. Inside, a handwritten note. "I tried to fight the thing I feared the most. I lost. I want to learn how to be honest." He signed it with his name. She placed the book on a shelf and left it there. It would not be the bridge. It would be a marker of something that might one day become a lesson. The courtroom had ended months ago, but the echoes remained like wallpaper no one could peel away quickly. She had scars that no one saw. She had wins that returned little fanfare. She kept moving. She kept building. She kept a small file labeled "Why I Stayed" that she never opened. It would remain private. One morning, she walked past a bakery and bought 2 croissants. She ate one on the bench, thinking of small mercies. She texted a friend and typed 3 words, "Coffee later?" The friend replied with a GIF and a time. She put her phone away and watched people pass. The world was ordinary in its ways. Ordinary made her steady. Spring settled over the city with a quiet warmth. The lawsuits thinned. The smear posts faded. The news cycle moved on to louder stories. Melissa stood on her balcony one morning with a cup of tea in her hand. The sunlight painted the buildings gold. She felt the calm in her bones. Her phone buzzed. A message from her lawyer. All remaining claims dismissed. She read the line twice. Her shoulders loosened. A soft breath left her lips. She typed a simple reply. "Thank you." She put her phone down and allowed the silence to settle. Months of chaos had ended not with fireworks, but with stillness. Stillness felt like a gift. She grabbed her bag and left for the office. People greeted her with warmth. Hands lifted in acknowledgement. Voices softened when speaking to her. Not out of fear, but respect. She had earned that without asking. In a meeting later that day, the team celebrated a new milestone. A partnership she had pursued quietly finally agreed to launch with her. There was laughter. There were clinks of glasses. She watched her colleagues celebrate and felt grateful for faces that chose her without condition. Her assistant leaned in. "You did it." She smiled. "We did it." Meanwhile, Richard packed a suitcase in a small apartment across town. He folded shirts with a care he rarely used. He placed a notebook in the front pocket. A notebook filled with ideas he had once abandoned. He had taken a job with a nonprofit tech group. It paid modestly. It demanded humility. It made him learn again. He told himself he wanted a reset. He told others he wanted purpose. Maybe both were true. Before leaving for the airport, he sent her one final message. "I'm leaving for some months. Thank you for the truth. I'm working on myself. I won't contact you again unless you want that." She read it while walking through the corridor of her office. She did not stop moving. She did not reply. She simply placed the phone in her bag and let the message exist without obligation. She returned home that night and cooked dinner for herself. She played music she liked. She opened a book and fell asleep on the couch. Her world had space again. In the months that followed, her life grew in ways she had not expected. She launched a mentorship program. She hosted skill workshops. She offered grants quietly and without credit. Young developers sent thank you emails that filled her with a steady joy. One young woman approached her after a seminar. "You changed my life," she said. "I didn't think people like you existed." Melissa felt her throat tighten. "I'm glad I could help," she said. After the seminar, she walked outside into the warm evening. She watched her city breathe. She realized she was finally breathing with it. She joined a hiking group. She met people who didn't know her story or her name in the newspapers. She laughed at simple jokes. She shared snacks with strangers. She carried a small backpack filled with nothing but essentials. One afternoon during a hike, a man beside her asked, "Is this your first time on this trail?" "Yes," she said. "You're keeping up well." She smiled. "I like the pace." They talked about weather and trails and books. Not about courtrooms or betrayals or millions. It felt honest. It felt easy. He didn't ask for her last name. She didn't offer it. When he asked if she'd join again next week, she said yes without thinking twice. That evening she returned home, placed her boots by the door, and caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked older in some ways, freer in others. She touched the edge of the mirror and whispered quietly, "You made it." Her phone buzzed once. A group chat from her hiking team. She smiled at the screen. She washed her face, changed into soft clothes, and poured herself a small drink. She sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, and let her mind rest. Her life wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But it was hers again. Far away, in a quiet town overseas, Richard stepped out of his new office after a long day. He walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench. Children played. Bicycles passed. Dogs pulled their owners along. He breathed in the air and felt something like peace. He pulled out his notebook and wrote 3 lines. "I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. I lost the version of myself I respected. I'm learning to become someone worth knowing." He closed the notebook. He didn't know if he would ever see her again. He didn't know if she would forgive him beyond the polite distance she offered. But he knew this. She had forced him to meet himself. And the meeting had reshaped him. Months later, Melissa received a message from a tech foundation. Her mentorship program had been nominated for an award. She attended the ceremony with a calm smile. When she stepped onto the stage, applause rose through the room like steady thunder. She accepted the award and said only this: "I built something after surviving something. If you're rebuilding your life, start small. Start honest. Start scared. Just start." The room rose to its feet. After the event, she walked through the lobby with her assistant. Her assistant said, your story could be a movie. Melissa shook her head. It's just a life, she said. A remarkable one, her assistant replied. She stepped outside. The evening air wrapped around her. Cars passed. People talked. The world moved. She took a deep breath. She no longer carried the man who laughed at her pain. She no longer carried the courtroom weight. She no longer carried the need to explain herself. She carried only her future. And it was light. She smiled and walked toward her car. A life rebuilt. A story closed. A new chapter already waiting. Enjoy stories like this? Like the video, share it, and subscribe for more.